Welcome to Deep Dive. Welcome. We're thrilled to have you here. Let's dive in and grow together.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling Black Swan events.
Oh yeah, those unpredictable, impactful things that seem to come out of nowhere.
Exactly, and we're not just talking about like literal black swans, although those are pretty rare too, we're talking about.
Those events that shake things up, like the 2008 financial crisis or the sudden rise of the internet.
Right, those things nobody really saw coming, but they had huge consequences. So to guide our deep dive today, we have the work of Nassim Nicholas Taleb.
The guy who basically wrote the book on black swans, literally.
Yeah, and also a really interesting review of Taleb's work by a statistics expert, Professor David Aldous from UC Berkeley.
It's fascinating because they agree on some key points, but also have some pretty significant disagreements.
Which makes for a great discussion,
Mm-hmm.
right? So Taleb lays out this idea called the ludic fallacy.
Which is basically saying that we shouldn't apply the rules of games to real-life randomness.
It's like assuming that because a coin flip is 50-50, the stock market will behave in a similarly predictable way.
And that's where Aldous comes in with a slightly different take. He emphasizes the power of slow trends.
Those subtle forces that shape our world over time, like the rise of mobile technology.
Yeah, it wasn't a sudden boom, but it's totally changed how we live.
It's like the difference between a sudden earthquake and the slow erosion of a coastline.
Both reshape the landscape, but in very different ways.
So are you saying that even slow, gradual change can be a black swan event?
That's an interesting question. Taleb might say true black swans are inherently unpredictable, while Aldous might say even slow trends can have unexpected consequences.
But they both agree that we tend to overestimate our ability to predict the future.
Whether through fancy models or just our gut feeling.
Taleb calls this the scandal of prediction, right? We're obsessed with predicting, but we're terrible at it.
And we rarely acknowledge our failures. We create stories to explain the past, making things seem more predictable in hindsight.
Like when someone says, I knew that stock was going to crash after it already happened.
Exactly. Taleb calls that the narrative fallacy. We try to make sense of things after they've happened.
We all do it. It's comforting to believe we have some control over the unpredictable.
But both Taleb and Aldous urge us to embrace the reality of uncertainty.
And that's where Taleb's concept of Mediocristan and Extremistan comes in. Can you break that down for us?
Sure, Mediocristan is the realm of the predictable where outcomes cluster around the average.
Like height or weight. Most people fall within a certain range.
Right. Extremistan is where a single event can have a massive impact on the average.
Like book sales. Most books sell a modest amount, but a few become huge bestsellers.
Exactly. And Taleb sees financial markets as prime examples of Extremistan.
Whereas Aldous argues they're actually the exception, not the rule, when it comes to real-world randomness.
That's right. They have very different perspectives on how much of life is truly unpredictable.
This is getting really interesting. So we've got Taleb saying, we live in a world dominated by Extremistan where anything can happen.
And Aldous suggesting that most of life unfolds in Mediocristan, the land of the predictable.
Wow, I'm already seeing how these abstract concepts can have real-world relevance.
Absolutely. And that's what we'll explore further as we dig into more specifics from Taleb and Aldous. We were talking about how Taleb sees the world as this kind of Extremistan dominated by unpredictable events.
Yeah, and Aldous pushes back a bit with this idea of the agoran fallacy.
Right, so the agora was the marketplace in ancient Greece.
Okay, so is he saying that markets are somehow misleading?
Well, kind of. Taleb uses financial markets as this model for randomness, but Aldous says markets are a special case.
Because they're designed to be volatile.
Exactly.
Okay.
They amplify uncertainty, making it seem like the norm when Aldous argues it's actually the exception.
So like a casino.
Yeah, good analogy. The Agoran fallacy is assuming that what happens in the casino or the stock market is how the whole world works.
So instead of focusing on these crazy volatile markets, Aldous wants us to pay more attention to the slow, steady stuff.
The termite damage rather than the earthquake.
Ooh, I like that analogy. An earthquake is a classic black swan, sudden, devastating, unpredictable.
But termites working slowly can ultimately do just as much damage.
It's so easy to focus on the drama of the big event, but those subtle forces can be just as powerful in the long run.
Absolutely. And that's why Aldous is so interested in slow trends.
This is making me rethink how I see the world.
Hmm.
Okay, so back to the scandal of prediction.
Where Taleb is super skeptical of any attempt to predict the future, especially in finance and economics.
Yeah, and he even talks about the distortion of silent evidence.
It's like we only focus on the predictions that came true and ignore all the times the experts got it wrong.
Like with the lottery. We only hear about the winners, not the millions who lost.
Exactly. And that can make us overconfident in our ability to predict things.
But doesn't Aldous have a slightly different view on prediction?
He does. He acknowledges the limitations, but doesn't completely dismiss statistical prediction.
Which is more about probabilities and ranges of outcomes.
Right. Instead of trying to pinpoint exact events, it's about understanding the possible scenarios.
So while Taleb might say don't even bother trying to predict the stock market,
Aldous might say you can't know for sure, but you can use data to get a sense of the possibilities.
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we can't escape uncertainty, but we can learn to work with it.
Exactly. Statistics becomes a tool for managing uncertainty, not eliminating it.
I'm starting to see how these different perspectives can really change how we approach decision-making.
And that's what makes this conversation so fascinating.
So before we get into that, let's talk about how Taleb and Aldous differ in how they think we should actually respond to the possibility of Black Swan events.
Yeah, they both acknowledge that the unexpected can happen, but their approaches to dealing with it are quite different.
Okay, so Taleb is all about this mix of being super cautious and super aggressive.
Yeah, like protect yourself from ruin, but be ready to jump on those huge opportunities.
It's like having a bunker in a rocket ship ready to go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pretty bold approach.
But it makes me think about what Aldous said about financial markets, maybe being the exception, not the rule.
Right. So does Taleb's strategy only work in those specific environments?
That's a good question. Maybe Taleb would say his approach works anywhere black swans can happen.
But Aldous might be more cautious about applying it too broadly.
So we need to be careful about extrapolating from specific examples like financial markets to the whole world.
Yeah, it's all about critical thinking, considering the context, the risks, the rewards, the level of uncertainty.
We need a black swan radar, scanning for disruptions, but not getting so caught up in fear that we miss opportunities.
And that's where Aldous' emphasis on slow trends comes in.
Right, while we're bracing for those sudden shocks, the world is constantly changing in subtle ways.
Like the rise of social media, it wasn't overnight, but it's completely reshaped how we communicate and consume information.
It's like we're all part of this ongoing experiment. We don't even realize it.
And if we're not paying attention to those changes, we might miss important signals or get blindsided by unexpected consequences.
So understanding slow trends is just as crucial as understanding black swans.
Absolutely. Because while black swans make the headlines, it's often those gradual shifts that have the biggest impact.
It's not just about surviving the unexpected, but adapting to the constantly changing landscape.
The only constant is change.
But that can feel overwhelming. How do we even begin to make sense of it all?
Well, one takeaway is to cultivate a mindset of continuous learning and adaptability.
Being open to new information, challenging our assumptions, adjusting our course when needed.
It's about becoming comfortable with ambiguity, accepting that we can't know everything and the future is uncertain.
And that's where intellectual humility comes in, right?
Exactly. Acknowledging the limits of our knowledge, being open to different perspectives, accepting that we might be wrong.
It's a powerful idea, but also a challenging one. It's easy to get attached to our own beliefs, even when they might be flawed.
It is. But the more we can embrace intellectual humility, the more we can learn and grow.
It's about seeing the world as a source of discovery, not a place where we need to have all the answers.
Absolutely. And one way to put that into practice is by actively seeking out diverse perspectives.
Reading things we disagree with, talking to people from different backgrounds, challenging our own biases.
Exactly. Expanding our mental horizons, moving beyond our echo chambers, and exposing ourselves to new ideas.
It's about shifting from a mindset of knowing to a mindset of learning.
And that can be incredibly enriching, both intellectually and personally.
This is really making me think about how I approach information and form my own opinions. It's so easy to get stuck in our own ways of seeing things.
It is. But if we're not willing to step outside our comfort zones, we're missing out on so much.
So instead of just defending our own positions, we should be asking questions, seeking clarification, considering alternative viewpoints.
Exactly. Moving from debate to dialogue.
And that shift can be so powerful, both personally and in how we engage with the world.
It's about fostering understanding, building connections, recognizing that we're all part of this ongoing conversation about navigating life's complexities.
This has been an incredible conversation. I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for approaching uncertainty, embracing complexity, and navigating the unpredictable.
Me too.
We covered so much, from the Ludic fallacy to the Kelly strategy, from black swans to slow trends.
We explored the limitations of prediction, the allure of narratives, the importance of balancing different perspectives.
And most importantly, the power of mindset in shaping how we experience an unpredictable world.
Well said.
Huge thanks to Professor Aldous for his work. We'll include links in the show notes for those who want to learn more.
Absolutely.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this question. How can you apply these insights to your own life, your decisions, your relationship with the unknown? Until next time, stay curious and keep those minds open to the unexpected.